Story is Face in the Dark, written by Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond is an Anglo-Indian writer, a prolific writer. His work is popular among the adults as well as in children. Ruskin Bond is much fascinated towards the paranormal experiences, and due to his fascination to paranormal experiences, his stories reflect these experiences. Once Ruskin Bond said that he didn't believe in ghosts, but every time he see the ghosts. And he explained this in this way, that due to his loneliness, due to his solitude, he usually encounters imaginary ghosts. Ruskin Bond always emphasized that there is a superstitious element in almost every human being. So, due to that superstition and their state of loneliness, it's not very difficult that someone can see the ghost. So, actually it's a reflection of their mind. It's a pressure of their loneliness, what Ruskin Bond explained. So, in the following story, what we are going to discuss, Ruskin Bond relates a thrilling incident set among the picturesque hills of Shimla, in which Ruskin Bond encounters a boy in a pine forest who didn't have any features in the face, and when he was full of fear, he ran away to escape from there. And when he escaped, he had no way to escape, because the other man that he encountered also didn't have any feature in his face. And in that way the story ended. Mr. Oliver is the chief character of the story, protagonist. Protagonist is one who is the chief character of the story. So, it has many layers of meaning. If we literally think about the story, we will say that there is a ghost, and actually the man sees the ghost, Mr. Oliver. But if we go into the layers of the story, we will find that it is his loneliness, it is his element of superstition, it is his belief in the paranormal. Due to that, he observed ghosts. So, with this background, we start the story and we will understand it step by step. So, Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher. So, there is a story of an Anglo-Indian teacher, means one of his parents or grandparents are from England, and he was Mr. Oliver, was returning to his school. He was on the way to his school late one night. It was late in the night, so the scene is of late night. On the outskirts of the hill station of Shimla. So, the story is set in Shimla, and it's not Shimla city proper, it is the outskirts of Shimla. Outskirts means outer boundary of Shimla. He was on the way to go back to the school. So, it's very clear it's a boarding school, otherwise the teacher won't go to the school late night. from before Kipling's time. Now it has been told that before Rudyard Kipling's time, the school had been run on English public school lines. So before Rudyard Kipling was there, the school has been run as an English public school, has been run on the instructions as given by the English education system. And the boys, most of them from wealthy Indian families. So it is a school for boys, residential school, and these boys belongs to wealthy Indian families. They come from well-to-do families. What type of a dress they do have? They wore blazers, caps and ties. Life magazine, one of the famous magazines in the world, in a feature on India, so Life magazine, when published a feature in India, had once called it the Eton of the East. So this school, which is not still named, this school has been termed as Eton of the East. Eton is one of the prestigious schools found during the time of Henry VI in England. So this school is being compared as the Eton of the by the Eton, and it is said that it is the Eton of the East by Life magazine. So the school was very prestigious, and as formally said that boys from very rich families come over here. Mr. Oliver, who is a protagonist in this story, chief character, has been teaching in the school for several years. So Mr. Oliver is a senior teacher. He has been teaching in the school for several years. So this is the setting of the story. There is a school in the outskirts of Shimla, and when it is said that it is Eton of the East, school is being compared with Eton. Metaphor is being used. The two things are compared. So figure of speech is metaphor. Now the Shimla Bazaar with its cinemas and restaurant was about 3 miles from the school. So the location of cinema and restaurant is about 3 miles. And it's interesting that the writer has written the word cinema, because from cinema Mr. Oliver can get the clue about the imagination of the ghosts. So the Shimla Bazaar with its cinemas and restaurant was about 3 miles from the school, and Mr. Oliver, a bachelor. Now Mr. Oliver is a bachelor, so that is what giving the symbol that he may be a lonely person. He didn't have a family. So Mr. Oliver was a bachelor, usually strolled into the town in the evening. So strolling is walking in a pleasant way. So Mr. Oliver used to stroll in the town during evening time, walking in a way that pleases him. Returning after dark, and he returned to school when it is dark. And when he returned to school, he would take a shortcut through the pine forest. So there is a forest of pine trees. There is a forest of pine trees which is on the way to return to the school. And whenever there was a strong wind, now let us see, the writer has set up a strange combination so that the element of fear can enter in the story. When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds. So whenever there is a strong wind, the pine trees are very long, very tall trees, and they made very sad sound, eerie sounds. Mysterious sounds. So it is observable that pine trees do show mysterious sounds. that kept most people to the main road. So due to these mysterious and strange sounds of pine trees, whenever there is a strong wind, people don't follow that shortcut. They usually go from the main road. But Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or an imaginative man. But Mr. Oliver was strong enough. He was not nervous, neither he was imaginative. He carried a torch and its gleam. The batteries were running down. So gleam is a short light. So Mr. Oliver, who was not a nervous and imaginative man, he carried a torch with a dying battery. So there is a dark all over, and there are pine trees making eerie sounds, and the only one light that is available is of battery torch, which is about to die. Fitfully running down, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. So Mr. Oliver took the narrow path, shortcut from the pine forest with his dying battery torch. And what did he saw in the forest? When its flickering light fell in the figure of the boy. Now see the line, flickering light fell in the figure of the boy, alliteration, F is being repeated again and again. And we have read one more line, pine trees made sad eerie sounds. Now tree cannot make a sound like a man, it's a personification. So what happened? When he fitfully moved down the forest, flickering light fell in the figure of the boy. So the flickering light of his torch fell on a boy, figure of a boy, not boy. We cannot say he was a boy. That light fell on the figure of the boy, who was sitting alone on a rock. So in that pine tree, a boy was sitting alone on a rock. Mr. Oliver stopped. Boys were not supposed to be out after dark. So as it was outskirt, Mr. Oliver knew that this boy must belong to our school, and it is not the law of the school that boy should be out in the dark. So why is this boy sitting over in the jungle at late night? Mr. Oliver was curious to know what happened. So Mr. Oliver said, "What are you doing out there, boy?" He raised a question, asked Mr. Oliver sharply. Mr. Oliver asked sharply, moving closer. He moved closer to that figure of the boy, that he could recognize the miscreant. So Mr. Oliver was angry because he is thinking he is a miscreant. Miscreant is one who has done a bad deed. So Mr. Oliver is thinking that that boy must have done some mischief, that's why he is over here. So he moved sharply to the figure of the boy so that he could recognize who the miscreant is this, who the boy is this. But even as he approached the boy, as Mr. Oliver approached the boy, Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. Mr. Oliver thought that something is wrong. The boy appeared to be crying. The boy was crying. His head hung down. So his head was down. He was not looking upwards. Now look at the line, head hung down, HH. It's an alliteration. His head hangs down. He held his face in his hand. So he was holding his face in his hand. And his body shook convulsively. And his body was shaking entirely. And it was a strange, soundless weeping. So, strange, soundless weeping. Again alliteration. Strange S, soundless S. And he was weeping without a sound. So Mr. Oliver is saying strange, soundless weeping. And Mr. Oliver felt distinctly uneasy. with this type of weeping, Mr. Oliver was uneasy. So, he got an element of fear also. Well, what's the matter? Mr. Oliver asked, again with curiosity, what's the matter? He asked, his anger giving way to concern. Now, up till now he was angry, but now he is concerned about what has happened to the boy. He is weeping. What are you crying for? Mr. Oliver asked. The boy would not answer or look up. So the boy didn't answer, neither he looked up. And his body continued to be racked with silent sobbing. So he was weeping, he was sobbing, and silently he was sobbing, giving no answer to Mr. Oliver. Now again Mr. Oliver said, "Come on, boy, you shouldn't be out here at this hour." So Mr. Oliver said, "You should not be outside here at this hour, at this late hour of night. Tell me the trouble, look up, tell me the trouble, look up." So now Mr. Oliver said, "Look up, the boy, tell me the trouble, what's the trouble with you?" The boy looked up. He took his hands from his face and looked up at his teacher. So the boy uncovered his face, which he was holding with his hands, and looked up to the teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face. Now that light which was about to die, which was flickering, that light fell on the face of the boy, if you could call it a face. Mr. Oliver's torchlight fell on the face of the boy, and Mr. Oliver is saying, is it really a face? It had no eyes, ears, nose or mouth. It was just a round smooth head. So it was not face. No features of the face, faceless face. And the only thing that is lighting, to light that face, was a flickering light. Except that flickering light, everything was dark. So rather, this scene is created to manifest the inclination of the human being towards the dark. They are too much attracted towards the dark and the ghosts. So it was just a round smooth head with a school cap on the top of it. So that boy was holding a school cap on the top of it, that face. And that's where the story should have ended. But for Mr. Oliver, it did not end here. Now the story should have ended here. But for Mr. Oliver, the trouble is not ended. There is more trouble. So the story didn't end it. What happened next? The torch fell from his trembling hand. So Mr. Oliver's hand were shaking due to fear. And in fear, the torch fell from his hand. And he scrambled down the path. So Mr. Oliver, in panic, ran away from the path, from that pine forest, running blindly through the trees. So Mr. Oliver was in fear, running blindly through the trees. He saw the boy with no features of the face, and calling for help. He was asking for help. He saw he was still running towards the closed school building. So Mr. Oliver was running towards the school building, and then again he saw a light. One light he has lost. Now again there was a light. He saw a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. What did he saw in the dark? He saw a lantern that was swinging in the path. So lantern was swinging in the path. This is again an element of fear. Mr. Oliver stumbled up to the watchman. That was the watchman. Mr. Oliver jumped into that watchman, gasping for breath. So Mr. Oliver was gasping, breathing with open mouth. The watchman said, "What is it, Sahab?" Asked the watchman. Has there been an accident? Why are you running? Mr. Oliver said, "I saw something horrible. A boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face." No face, Sahab. No eyes, nose, mouth, nothing. Do you mean it was like this, Sahab? Asked the watchman. Now the watchman didn't also have any features. No nose, no eyes, no mouth. Who was holding the lantern? And he raised the lamp on his own face. Now again, to show the ghost, light is being used. In the lantern, he can see the face of a watchman who has no eyes, no face and no ears. The watchman has no eyes, no ears, no features at all. Not even an eyebrow. It was not told about the boy that he didn't have an eyebrow or he have an eyebrow, but the watchman didn't have an eyebrow. And that's when the wind blew the lamp out. Now it is said that the wind blew the lamp out. And Ruskin Bond ends the story here. Wind blew the lamp out, and it is up to the reader to draw the conclusion. We may think that Mr. Oliver died after this strange accident. The meaning of wind blew the lamp out. After seeing the face, the light of the lamp vanished. It may be possible the light of the life of Mr. Oliver vanished after such a horrible experience. So it's all up to the reader that what actually happened. Now, there can be many possible explanations of this story. One is that it was a imagination of Mr. Oliver, who has been a lonely person, a bachelor, seeing films in the cinemas and getting fascinated from that. And as Ruskin Bond has said, that he always believed that he always sees the ghost, but he didn't believe in ghosts. And whenever he sits lonely, the ghosts are visible to him. So that is what Ruskin Bond is trying to share with the readers, that he had such paranormal experiences. Or there can be some other interpretations also. Someone can say, if we just go to the philosophical side, we can say that it's a school of a rich person, rich people, and that boy, that specific boy can only be specified with the dress of the school. He has no individual identity, and Mr. Oliver didn't enough light to throw on his students. That can be a social interpretation, that can be a philosophical twist. That can be a one layer, but the imaginative skills of Ruskin Bond here gets full expression, and there is a supernatural element in the story, because Ruskin Bond tries to say that there can be something like a spirit. So we can conclude there may be a real ghost, number one, or it may be a imagination of a lonely person, or the story is trying to give a philosophical message that the teacher is not able to throw enough light on his students, and students have lost their individuality. They are identified by the dress of the school, and every individual is identified by his own features of the face. So he has lost all his features. So these can be the possible interpretations. You can have anyone as you like. Thank you very much.